Welcome tonight to the Cheltenham School District Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday, November 1st. I'll begin with a roll call, starting from this side. Mr. Cohen?
Present.
Ms. Haywood?
Present.
Ms. Walter?
Present.
Ms. Lohman?
Present.
Mr. Epps?
Present.
Mr. Brudell Williams?
Present.
Ms. Henry?
Present.
Keep it down over there. And I'm here, Dan Schultz, and I will just note that my esteemed co-chair, Mr. Fishbein, is at the World Series right now. I will say I can't judge that priority. But he does wish he was here. But no, we tried to get him to Zoom in, and he responded with a laugh. And I apologize, I don't have the agenda in front of me. I believe there's minutes to approve. Correct. So I have a motion to approve.
So this.
Ms. Loveman?
Second, Charles.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Mr. Swigart, I hand it to you.
Thank you, Dan. How fast do you want me to talk to get to 8 o'clock? All right, so I'm going to start off just a high-level overview of what I'm going to talk about tonight. The interim financial statements is point number one. Point number two, just a brief update on ESSER, which is actually ARP. An update on the Act 1 timeline and future board action required for the next couple of months. And an item for board action in 2 weeks, an Act 57 resolution. I'll describe briefly what that is. All right, so as you're all aware, we present financial information each month, and we show our expenditures by local, state, and federal sources, and we show it by object. As part of our monthly financial reporting, I am proposing that we change that reporting model and we make it match what our quote-unquote end-year product is. So on the left, I have our end-year product here, which is our independent audit report as performed by mailing, this year by BDD accounting firm. And over here on the right, I have our annual financial report that we present to the Pennsylvania Department of Education each year. You can see on the expenditure side, we're reporting our expenditures by function. So by function means what these expenditures are trying to achieve. So you can see we have instructional expenditures, which would be everything from our teacher salary to our special ed tuitions, to our charter school tuitions. We have support services, which would be everything that happens here in the administrative office, including facilities and transportation. We have operation of non-instructional services, which would be our athletics and our co-curricular expenditures. And down here we have debt service, which would be our debt service expenditures. These items are further broken out on our state reporting to the Pennsylvania Department of Education, 1100, 1200, 1300, and so on and so forth, under 1000 instruction. And I feel like this breakdown, when compared from year to year, is a more informative approach, rather than looking at an object code, say 500, which includes everything from charter school tuition to transportation costs. We're now looking at expenditures and what they do. And we're looking at that information on a monthly basis and seeing how it's going to stack up when we get to year end, when we get to this final report. And I realize it will probably take some time to get used to, but I think once you get used to it, you'll better understand what's happening in the district and exactly where the majority of our money is going. And I think this is a perfect example of our $116 million in expenditures. You know, the vast majority is going to teacher salaries and in the classroom expenditures. Yes.
Did you want to are you about to present into that? Or before you jump to the presentation, maybe it would make sense to ask for board questions. Sure. So that way, before we see the report.
Please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I assume that 1,500 non-public school programs is part of the cost that we pay for charter schools or other things, and that charter schools are probably rolled into some other element under instruction. Is that correct?
Non-public is actually private schools or Catholic schools. So the Cheltenham School District is responsible for educating every student within Cheltenham Township, regardless of where they go to school. When we get certain federal monies, some of that money gets redirected towards those schools if they apply for it. And that miscellaneous items in their miscellaneous allocation.
Okay, thank you.
And with knowing that there's a large amount of presentation and potentially additional context, is there any other board questions? And are there any questions from the public? Let's keep going.
In addition to this presentation, I think it's also advantageous to look at a balance sheet. So the two integral pieces of financial statements are the balance sheet and the income statement in the for-profit world. Here it is a statement of net assets. And instead of income statement, it's a statement of revenues, expenditures, changes in net assets or fund balance. On an interim basis, a lot of these receivables, these accruals aren't as important as a few numbers I'll point out. One being cash. This is a number we pay a lot of attention to because we collect most of our revenues at the beginning of the year. And this large balance, you'll see monthly slowly drops and drops and drops. And we particularly pay attention to where our cash is year over year. If we're seeing an increase as we are here, that means we're maintaining our structural deficit and we aren't running in any sort of alarming financial position. Another number that's probably a good idea to point out is this federal revenue receivable. While we did get all that federal money, they are very slow to peel back their pocketbooks and give it to the district. So that impacts our cash flow, doesn't impact our revenue, it impacts the timing on which we get our money. The other piece I'll point out on this sheet is just going to be the high-level review of revenue and expenditures. If you're looking at revenue on a year-to-year basis, last October versus this October, you'll see we have an additional $4.5 million of revenue year over year, and our expenditures, while $443,000 less, is a very insignificant number when it comes to the 32 and 33 million on the expenditure side. So if I flip on to the next page, it is that same presentation I discussed 2 slides ago with all that additional information. You can see that 95 versus 91 revenue item I talked about, and 32.6 versus a $33 million expenditure line item I talked about. And when you're comparing October of 2022 to October of 2021, we had a net surplus of 63 million this year and 58 million last year. And I will briefly touch on some of the largest changes. I'm sure there are questions. Why is our local source revenue 88 million this year versus 85 million last year? Well, as you recall, we did have a tax increase. We're still seeing very strong local tax collections and earned income taxes and real estate transfer taxes. They're still hanging on pretty steady. I heard reports about a decrease in home sales and transfer taxes. We'll probably see that, but as the government works, we typically see that in a lag. It usually takes a couple months to hit us. So I would anticipate to see that drop. But for now, we're looking good and we're looking strong on the local revenue side. We're also seeing a large increase in interest income, as was expected with the increase in the Fed rate. It's interesting, in a year's time, we went from trying to refinance all our debt to capture low interest rates. Now we're trying to find ways to push our cash to get the most investment return, which is where our focus has been so far this year. On the state side, we have $7.2 million worth of revenue versus $5.8 million last year. If you recall, the homestead farmstead relief money was increased by 20%. So we've already collected that $600,000 increase in homestead money. And we also received one of our basic ed subsidy payments a little sooner than anticipated. And that was $1.4 million of value. So those 2 items led to our increase on the state side. Moving down to expenditures. The one item we're paying heavy attention to is special ed. We wouldn't expect to see a decrease since we absorbed a lot of our autistic support programs and brought those teachers in-house. However, we are seeing a decrease because we are behind on paying one of the IE bills. Not really behind, but we just haven't paid it yet. It's due in November, and that's the big reason for the drop. Not a real drop, but October to October looks like a decrease in expenditures. The other area to highlight here, transportation. This is just timing of bill payment and some special ed transportation bills that we paid sooner than we paid them last year. We're a little more timely on paying all of our bills, which is a good thing, keeping our vendors happy. But nothing nothing alarming in terms of year-over-year change. For reference, these are the expenditure descriptions provided by our auditors. I did include this blue column here, just one more description about what each of this is. So regular programs, teachers, special ed teachers, charter school tuitions, special ed tuitions, vocational programs, that's Eastern, that's our industrial art teachers, our home ec teachers included in that. Some of them relatively obvious. Instructional staff services, that's library and curriculums, less obvious. Pupil personnel services, student services, counselors, psychologists, all on that line item, which is why it's relatively large. I did include a description here for reference. All right, and also for your reference, I did include the format, how we showed things in the past. I'll continue to do that for a while if anyone likes seeing it in this form.
Would you like me to take questions on that?
Sure, absolutely.
Are there any questions on the budget reports, and also now that you have real numbers for the new format? The board? All right, seeing them.
Michael Brooks.
Yes. And since it's technically a new meeting, you wouldn't mind stating
No
your
problem.
name and location.
Michael Brooks, students at Cedarbrook and also at Cheltenham. I do see the year ends 10/31. When we have the budget for 2022, 2023, are we also going on a year end of October?
No, our year end is June 30th. This
Okay.
is just a presentation. So we're kind of taking stock of where we are today.
So-
October 30th.
So do you anticipate, is it going in the right direction trajectory for that budget of 127? Or do we anticipate that the revenue that's coming in locally in the state will meet that yearly budget?
The future plan is to add a column for projection,
Okay.
being it only October, and we're only 2 years into the operating year, the projection isn't going to be anything more than budget.
Okay.
So as we get closer to the end of the year, we'll add that projection column and we'll see what it looks like towards the end. So obviously, hopefully on the revenue side, we hope to do much better.
Right.
127, and on the expenditure side, we hope to do better, much less than 127.
And it's a good clarifying point. This is every month we receive an updated version of this
Okay.
snapshot, and it allows us and anybody who attends month over month to track that trajectory. And we may explore. I know in the past there was actually just a chart that showed, this is where we were in October, and this is where we were in November. Maybe that would be worth exploring as well. Yes.
Some of these Cheltenham High School, Cedarbrook, Middle School, line item for special ed, I know we haven't paid that yet. Do we anticipate it'll be right in line with last year?
The transition from autistic support from the IU to district will provide marginal savings, but at the end of the day, it'll be in line. At the end of the day, we'll spend approximately the same amount of money.
Thank you.
Nolly Ezel, student at Alpha Spark Seabrook in the high school. For transportation, you said it was higher from last year only because you paid more bills? Or is it just that more expensive?
Most of that is special ed transportation bills that we didn't incur at this point last year. We incurred them to date, and we paid some of them one more time. So if something jumps the boundary from October 31st into November 1st, then it doesn't show up in this report because we're just looking at this is pure cash coming in, coming out. We're not making an accruals. I mean, this was a September expense, it belongs in September. So
But over the year, you expect it to be the same or higher?
I would expect transportation to be higher this year because we have
Significantly higher or?
marginally higher.
Transportation definitely gonna be higher. No, I state that the last contract, we were really able to hold them status quo. This upcoming contract, so this is our final year of that contract. So just to quantify for you, over the years, over the next 5 years, we'll see potentially a 10 to 20% increase in transportation.
But also, I just want to make a clarifying point that the 2022-2023 budget, isn't a column up there now is the previous year's budget, and you will see that we budgeted increases in many areas, because year over year, the budget tends to go in one direction due to inflation and costs increasing. Ms. Lovett?
Someone had asked, sort of started to ask this question, I think, but where would charter school tuition payments fall in the expenditures, which line item?
So there's both regular ed students and charter schools and special ed. So the regular ed students fall in this.
Oh, they're not, it's not a separate.
In the special ed falls.
Oh,
They
okay,
used to
so,
be separate?
It's always been separate. It's always been separate.
but it is possible, obviously, to pull that number out, we know how much we're paying tuition.
Separate charges. Oh, yeah. absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that's what my question, okay, I was wondering about that.
If you want, we could do a separate enrollment and costs next month.
That might be helpful, thank you, yeah, thank you. And then the other question, which I think I've asked before probably, and so I apologize for asking it again, but special education, in terms of tuition reimbursement, settlement agreements, that kind of monetary outlay, does that fall in special programs, or is that accounted for in administration services such as legal?
So anything, so if we have a special ed settlement and a child attends another school, it doesn't matter at the end of the means, we are paying for a child to go to another school, it's special ed.
Okay, what if we're paying for compensatory services?
We're paying legal services, it's down.
It's down
here.
there.
And that's what the legal is settlements, the special ed settlements.
It is, okay,
Also, a lot of other things are actually included.
sure.
Administrative services line, that's one of the many items.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
All right, so the American Recovery Plan money and the ESSER money, ESSER 3 actually had the dual name, it was also called ARP. And up there is the amount of the federal money we received, 3.9 million. As a school district, I'm not sure if there's any difference on the private side, but as a school district, we're required to spend all of the money on response to COVID and dealing with the effects of COVID. And a percentage of that money goes towards compensatory education and towards a rehabilitation of students as they come back in the district as a catch up for time lost being outside of the classroom. So with all of that money we got from ESSER, the entirety of the 7.2 million can't just be strictly used for facilities. It all has to be used for various resources. And I believe much of the budget has gone to bringing our students back to where they were when they left, and then beyond, recovering from those last years of instruction within the classroom. And that's through, just to jump to the next slide real quick, that's through additional curriculum development, additional training, coaching teachers on student mental health issues, summer school, additional behavior specialists, all kinds of different in the classroom supports for our children. And then some of the early money I did include down there in the last bullet. We did spend a lot of that early money on PPE, masks, sanitization equipment, and air filters throughout the schools. So going back to that spreadsheet, this early money was used on that immediate response. There's immediate response type items. And some of this later money, ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, has been used on curriculum development and in the classroom supports mental and social health for our students. Looking at our expenditures in the 2020-2021 school year, we spent 1.1 million of the 7.2 million in CARES ARP money we were allotted. This past year, we spent approximately 1.8 million. That leaves an additional $4.1 million to spend of this ESSER money. And we have a few years to spend. Some of it's, I mean, when we applied for this money, we always earmark a lot towards those programs for students, and that's where the vast majority of that 4.1 has been set aside for.
Any board questions? This is the end of the ESSER portion, correct?
That is correct.
Is there any board questions on the ESSER spend? Any public comment or question?
I'm a simple man. Can you use this term compensatory education? Could you explain that?
Oh, that's just a broad term for when students come back to the classroom, any educational skills that they lost, compensating for that lost time, providing those students. That may not be
And
a term.
I actually
That's
just
a term
realized-
we use for it. The district I came from. That may not be popular.
It would have went off in my head.
Oh, sorry, please go on, and then I forgot to check if there's any.
How many more years is that ESSER money allotted for? And is the plan to balance out how you spend it? So it doesn't look like you're trying to cash out the last year and just spend it?
Our draw has been relatively level. Yeah, we do have lots of that. So there's another additional year on ESER 2, additional 2 years on ESER 3.
Okay.
And you can't cash out.
No, I know, I'm saying it's government money, so.
Yeah,
You
it has to be
don't want
spent.
the auditors to come in and look and say, oh, you spent 3 million in the
Yeah.
last year. Was that just because you didn't want to give it back, or was it?
Yeah, there's a strategic plan. One thing that is a priority for us is our curriculum writing. We need K through 12 in every content, a fluid curriculum, pacing guides, and that's something that we're definitely accelerating. We've also had to, I'm looking at pivoting. The mental health is so huge right now, and a lot of the vendors that we're outsourcing to are even having a hard time finding clinicians to provide those services. So I'm thinking about, I'm gonna have to do a pivot and try to get full-time FTE internally to address the need, because I can't wait for the vendors that can't supply services. So.
Thank you. And I failed to, in the last questions section, see, is there any hands or questions in the chat? I don't know.
These are the same two, I believe.
That sounds great. Okay, thank you.
All right, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I believe we touched on this last time, but our next action item as a district is before January 26th, we have to take an action on the budget, whether we want to ask for exception and increase our budget beyond the Act 1 index, or whether we are going to adopt a resolution saying we will stay within that index. So our current Act 1 index rate is 4.1%. So my suggestion or my proposal at this point is we don't need to ask for any sort of exception to go beyond that 4.1%. We'll just draft a resolution saying we'll stay within those guidelines, which leaves us a tax rate of anywhere between 0 and 4.1%. So that's coming up in December. Any questions on the Act 1 index?
One clarifying question, is that 4.1% final at this point, or you said currently 4.1%? Is it final?
That's the number that we
It is
just signed.
final.
That's correct. That's our number.
That's what I thought.
Next, thank you. And just for reference, the tax increase last year was 1.6%. So we were well below our Act 1 rate last year, which I believe was high 3s or low 4s.
I will just note, I saw head nods when you mentioned the resolution. Now would be a great time if you didn't agree with that because the balls will be set in motion and we probably look at passing that resolution in either December or January, correct? So, thank you.
All right, and I'll briefly go over Act 57. So that is a new state law where we have to provide relief for those who become new homeowners and may or may not receive their tax bill that first year they're charging county and interest. We by law have to provide ownership that they can prove if they didn't receive their bill, which I think is a very reasonable law. Very minor in the grand scheme of things. I don't know how many times it happens, but we have to make it part of our policy as well. So if you'd like any more information on Act 57,
And just again, a clarification, it is not that they would not owe those taxes. It is simply the penalty and interest on top because they didn't receive their bill in the first place. And this would be a resolution that we would potentially pass in November, this legislative meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
Would we need to pass a resolution if it's already law?
We need to make our local tax collection law to match the
Oh.
state, so. And so we make our policies and our rules match the state's law.
It's just gonna be a policy modification versus. a resolution? I'm just trying to figure out procedures.
It's a resolution, it's a formal resolution. Now you're getting into territory head.
I know Mr. Biasio.
Resolution, does it, that'll need to be added to the November
It should be,
18.
it should be on there if not. It's-
Okay.
Any other board questions? And any public questions or comments? All right, and that was it. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who is sitting over there. Truly appreciated every one of the questions in both the previous meeting and this meeting. And I think we could take a motion to adjourn. So, if I heard.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lewin and Mr. Epps. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.